All right, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host, Samantha Studebaker Carl, broadcasting to you from beautiful Indianapolis, Indiana. And I'm here with my good friends Jason and Angel and Lori and Catherine. And today we're going to continue our discussion of the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And we are in chapter 3. And chapter 3 talks about how to spot the upper limit problem in your daily life. And we are on page 90. We're going to be talking about the 3 P's: punishment, prevention, and protection. But before we get going on this, I want to give my friends an opportunity to introduce themselves, and then Catherine, you can start the reading and go from there. All right, guys, jump on out.
Lori Emmons in Denver, and I need the 3 P's.
Good morning, Jason, and Tampa Bay, Florida. Great to be here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Angel down in South Carolina.
Good morning, everybody. This is Catherine Clement. So last week, we were talking about how you can do things to kind of upper limit yourself. And like one of them was arguing, squabbling with somebody. And one of them was getting sick or getting hurt. And that kind of leads us into the 3 P's. Your exploration will go easier if you have a map. The map I use is what I call the 3 P's: punishment, prevention, and protection. The 3 P's can help you understand the real driving force behind many illnesses and accidents. I've probably got a few hundred examples of each of these in my files. Let me use a few vivid ones to illustrate the 3 P's. Punishment. Ryan, a successful middle-aged stockbroker, married and a pillar of the community, starts to suffer from what he calls killer migraines. When I explore it with him, I discover that he often gets them in the mid-afternoon. When I explore it further, he lets his hair down and confesses on the occasions he gets the mid-afternoon migraines, he has usually spent his lunch hour having irrational, exuberant sex with his young secretary. Ryan has not mentioned these wild romps to his wife. It turns out to be a classic example of the first P, punishment. It's not hard to see why he might be punishing himself with his killer migraines. He gets it right away when I explain the upper limit problem to him. He tells me that he's having more fun than he's had in ages. Intellectually, he knows that cheating and lying are not only endangering his career, but also destroying the intimacy in his marriage. However, the ecstatic sex doesn't just feel good, it's giving him what feels like a midlife rebirth. He's once again feeling the reckless passion of his motorcycle riding youth. If his rational, sober, conscious mind were in charge, Ryan might come up with a noble solution such as this. These delicious feelings have nothing to do with my secretary. I'm using my affair with her to awaken feelings I've been submerging for years under my dutiful life and comfortable marriage. This affair is showing me that I am failing to be my best and settling to live beneath my zone of genius. My affair is an upper limit problem. I'm going to make a sincere commitment to living in my zone of genius so I can feel ecstatically alive all the time without lying and cheating to get there. That's how his rational, sober, conscious mind might handle it. However, our unconscious minds are not rational and sober. They're direct and to the point. His unconscious mind's solution is to punish him with a killer migraine for feeling so much ecstasy. The migraine is a tool of his upper limit problem, and it speaks in a blunt language he cannot ignore. It quickly brings him back to earth after his lunchtime excursions into the stratosphere. The headache is literally a killjoy saying, "Welcome back to the painful consequences of lying, cheating, and not heeding the call to live in your zone of genius." Ryan didn't get to be a top executive by being a slow learner, so it didn't take him long to handle the situation. He said a painful goodbye to the lunchtime trysts and had a considerably more painful series of conversations with his wife. Ryan got one immediate reward for these courageous conversations. The migraine stopped. Many physical symptoms, such as headache and back pain, are warning signs like the flopping and wobble of a flat tire when you're driving on the highway. The symptoms are saying, slow down, stop what you're doing, and pay attention because there's something out of integrity here. Fortunately, Ryan got the message in time to wake up and handle the situation. He had two big tasks ahead of him: rebuilding his marriage and building a new home in his zone of genius. It took him the better part of the next 2 years to do both those things. He had to say no to a lot of his former activities and yes to dreams and visions that had been simmering within him for years. For one thing, he and his wife both realized that the enormous home they lived in no longer suited them now that their children were grown. For another, he shifted his focus within his company to mentoring young executives rather than frontline management. Mentoring was in his zone of genius. He thrived on it, and it provided major benefits to the company. I linked together the other two P's, prevention and protection, because they almost always occur at the same time. Here's the bottom line on prevention and protection. When you suffer symptoms of illness or experience an accident, you often do so because you're unconsciously trying to prevent yourself from having to do something you don't really want to do or protect yourself from something you don't want to feel. The illness or accident is your unconscious mind's clunky way of doing you a favor. It's a costly favor, though, and once you learn how to navigate your upper limits, you can move through your barriers in a much more friendly way than making yourself sick or having an accident. Having created a few unnecessary illnesses and accidents myself, I can testify that acting consciously is better. Let me give you an example of how prevention and protection work. Years ago, when I was a university professor, I shared an office for a while with a brilliant colleague named Dr. Smith. Every month, one of us made a presentation on our work to the other faculty members. In these presentations, we described our current activities and talked about where we were going with our work over the next year. There were about a dozen professors in my department, so the opportunity to make a presentation came around only once a year. On the morning of Dr. Smith's presentation, he showed up with laryngitis. I got to the office a half hour before his presentation, only to find him croaking to the dean that he wouldn't be able to do it. After the dean departed to cancel the meeting, I expressed my sympathies and remarked that I couldn't recall his ever missing a lecture due to illness. In fact, he had the reputation of being an Iron Man in the sense of never missing a class. I asked him if he might be willing to explore his laryngitis as an upper limit symptom. As you might recall, my breakthrough theory happened at Stanford, and this was one of my first opportunities to test it. Dr. Smith said he would, and in our conversation, we uncovered a classic example of prevention and protection. He told me that he and his wife had spent a wonderful weekend celebrating a decision he'd finally made. For a long time, Dr. Smith had wanted to break out of his university job and work in the private sector. An opportunity had opened up in a neighboring state, and he had gone there for the interview the previous Friday. Over the weekend, he had decided to take the job, and Saturday night we broke out a bottle of great champagne we'd been saving for a special occasion. As Monday loomed, though, Dr. Smith had to face sober reality again. He didn't want to tell the university yet because there were still some key details to work out about the new position. You can probably appreciate the bind he was in. Dr. Smith was happier and more excited than he had been in a long time, but he didn't want to talk about it yet. Instead, in his presentation, he had to appear enthusiastic about research he didn't want to be doing at a university where he no longer wanted to work. He didn't relish the idea of lying and faking it, but he couldn't figure out how to handle the situation any other way. This is the kind of double bind that freezes up the conscious mind's rational thought processes. It's in these moments that the unconscious mind goes to work on a solution. The solutions it comes up with are often inelegant and primitive, but they are direct and effective, and usually involve pain of some kind. The solution Dr. Smith's unconscious mind came up with was laryngitis. Prevention and protection came to the rescue. His croaky voice prevented him from having to give the presentation and protected him from the embarrassment of being a phony. An illness with prominent audible symptoms like laryngitis is a socially acceptable way of getting out of almost any activity. Halfway through our conversation, the laryngitis disappeared and his voice returned to normal, although he didn't notice it at first. Like a ringing telephone, many symptoms, even the most painful ones, stop annoying you when you get the message. He had a jaw-dropping moment of surprise when he finally realized he was speaking normally. It would probably make a better story if I told you he dashed into the dean's office, blurted out his guilty truths, and proceeded with his presentation. What actually happened, though, was that he chose to keep his mouth shut and headed back home to restore the celebratory mood with his wife. The next time you find yourself with a stomach ache, throbbing head, or a stubbed toe, ask yourself if you might be upper limiting. Sometimes a headache's just a headache, but often if you look a little deeper, you'll find that it's an expression of your upper limit problem. Then it's a signal that you need to expand instead of contract. I'm telling you that it's time to open up and embrace a new high water mark of positive energy that's trying to establish itself in you. Underneath the headache might be an insight that is as powerfully positive as the pain is negative. The surface pain is often caused by resisting the underlying positive message. Sometimes the positive message is a message we're afraid to hear, such as, it's time to quit my job and do something else. I've sat with dozens of clients as they made this kind of discovery, realizing that they had unconsciously preferred dealing with the pain of the chronic headache or back pain rather than the fear and uncertainty of the underlying message. The bad news is that pain can last a long time if we're unwilling to pay attention to the hidden message. The good news is that the fear and uncertainty last only as long as it takes us to hear the underlying positive message and begin to act on it. You want me to continue?
I think we talk about this for a bit and then see where
Okay.
we're at.
Okay.
This is a really interesting concept, this idea that, our illnesses can be a, upper limit problem. And I've heard, and you guys have probably heard in the past of situations where people are under a tremendous amount of stress and then all of a sudden have a heart attack or have some, have a car accident or some crazy thing like that, where it just stops them in their tracks and they have to reevaluate their life. So we've kind of heard of this in a different way, but we have looked at it before in general, I think the general population, as it's just stress induced versus this concept that maybe we aren't following what we really want to be doing or following our truth or following, or like we're trying to avoid doing something that we don't want to do. And, or like in this situation with this person, him having to face that he has to tell the one university that he doesn't want to be there anymore. I mean, I can completely get that. And I think that, when we're in school and younger ages and we're presented with a situation we're not comfortable with, say we have to give a speech in class or do a presentation or something like that, or even maybe not complete homework or we're not ready for a test or those sorts of things, is that we can, as a young person, fake an illness to get out of something. And so it's interesting to me that he's suggesting that our kind of subconscious mind goes to work on this problem that we are struggling with and comes up with a solution of discomfort in ourselves or making ourselves sick, right? Giving ourselves a headache or laryngitis or any number of illnesses. And so I find that just as a really interesting way of looking at it, because we have talked over the years about our subconscious mind helping us find solutions to create the life that we want, right? And in this suggestion, he's saying, okay, here it is, our our subconscious mind is acting as kind of more of a primitive part of ourselves that comes up with the simplest solution that it can come up with, is just making ourselves sick, so versus the concept of, we when we talked before and we say we want to create these amazing things in our lives, our subconscious can go to work and create these amazing things. And so I find that really, I don't know if it's necessarily contradictory, but it's interesting. I guess you could say. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'll hop out real quick here. Let me see here if I can get my screen to allow me to hop out. But yeah, it's fascinating because we do think of the subconscious, of us being able to depend on the subconscious for solutions, and then here the pressure or the stress or the issue is culminating in a physical ailment that somehow represents our struggle to overcome and how to deal with our maybe lack of confidence in making that upper limit decision. It's kind of hard to listen to. It's kind of hard to accept that we're sabotaging ourselves in that way. But I can see it, and I can definitely just see how it could be possible. So I'm trying to put it all in perspective as to what how I'm doing this for myself. Woke up with a little bit of a back issue. Of course, the last night I went to bed and I noticed it while I was in bed. Kind of woke up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, okay, but the thing is I kind of went out. I had a good night at an event, and I may have moved around a little bit more exuberantly than I have been, and I might have just pulled a muscle a little bit. I can't think of anything that I might be avoiding. So if it's an upper limit issue, then I'm oblivious to it, whatever it might be. I still managed to make it here this morning, and regardless. So yeah. So, but that's so interesting, and great reading. Thank you so much, Catherine.
My pleasure. Well, I have recognized that the body kind of, I mean, I hate to call it sabotaging, but it does, I've recognized that for so many years, and it is very difficult to take and to hear, and it doesn't negate the symptoms that you're having, but it's because some people hear that and they think, oh, well, you're telling me it's all in my head and the symptoms aren't real and I'm lying about the symptoms and stuff like that. And that's not really where that's going. It's just that, like, I can give you a perfect example. Excuse me. This ankle, when I broke my ankle last June, I think it was, I can't remember. So I had, for those of you that don't know me, everybody on the panel does, but I had a beautiful wolf hybrid that she was aging. I'd had her for about 15 years, and she was getting very she had a lot of pain. Her hips were starting to go and she was starting to get incontinent. And I knew that every time I walked her, and it was in my mind, every time I walked her, a little voice in my head would say, "This may be the last time you walk her." And it was such a painful time, like it was such precious time, but it was so painful because I knew what was coming and I knew the decision um, that I had to make. So as I went out the door with her, that little voice in my head was like, "This could be the last time you walk her." And I can totally see where I would fall and break my ankle, and so that I couldn't walk her that last time, or I couldn't move forward into what I was about ready to have to move forward into, if that makes any sense. Like I can totally see that.
Wow, that had to be a horrible experience for you because Sequoia was amazing. And I often wonder if it's I believe we also have a super conscious about us, and somehow that's protected me somehow, having this inconvenient, destructive symptom, I guess, of MS, because it's not anything like most people with MS. I have no pain, rarely ever, even with this cold. I didn't really feel a lot of pain, but somehow it prevents me from doing what I want to do. And I, like you, Jason, haven't figured out what the deal is, because I don't even know where I'm going or what I'm doing with it. I really have a good way of avoiding doing things that I probably should be doing. It's just amazing how your subconscious, your superconscious, has such control over our lives. It's protective, definitely a protective factor.
It's protective, and it's also like it points you to things in your life that need to be addressed and healed, you know? Like I can see, okay, I experience burning every day in different parts of my body from different uh injuries and different disease processes going on, but the underlying symptom is burning. Now, it doesn't escape my attention that probably my first conscious memory in my life, that, like the earliest memory that I can think back to, was when I tried to drink Drano and the acid was burning. I wiped it on my face and I wiped it on my chest, and the acid was burning my flesh. And so it doesn't, I see where there could be a connection there. I don't know if there's a connection there or not, but it certainly makes sense to me logically that that could be that I could be experiencing burning pain right now because of something about that situation that needs to be healed. Now, to me, that situation, although obviously burning skin is horrible, like that was when I found out that I was not my body, that I was spirit, because I popped up out of my body. So to me, I don't see any healing that needs to be done around that situation, because it was actually one of the most incredible experiences of my life. So, but there might be more there that I'm not looking into, as deeply as I need to, or something. I don't know. Same thing with some of the disease processes that I have. I can look back at different traumas in my life that occurred. Like I have a condition that affects certain body parts that have been traumatized in the past. And so I can totally see where there could be a connection of some sort of um, emotional healing, or, something that needs to be some kind of work that needs to be done around those situations, and that could possibly lead to less pain on my behalf. I'm not opposed to making those connections, because I think they totally make sense, especially with the cellular memory that we seem to have in these bodies of ours.
Yeah, that is really interesting to think on that and wonder if there's something in that experience that you and that maybe there's something that needs healed that you didn't know of, but and yet at the same time maybe it's just an indicator, like what you're saying also, is that you had that experience, and then the burning, and yet you also had the out of body experience into super amazing thing. And so it makes me think that when you feel the burning now, that maybe it's a reminder uh, of that amazing experience that you're not allowing yourself to have in this moment or something. I don't know if that was just something that popped into my head. I was over across the room, so I heard most of what you said, but some of it I may not have. So maybe you made that connection when you were talking, or maybe I'm just, I don't know. But um, this whole thing makes me think about my migraines that I've been struggling with over the last, it's a lot of years now, it seems like. And in some respects, I can see obvious connections between, okay, I get this migraine when I should, like right before I'm supposed to go do something, or or maybe not necessarily supposed to go do something, but I have this like pile of work that needs to get done that isn't like highest priority, but it's stuff I know I ought to do, and yet, I like I know I need to do it and I want to get it done, and then I end up with a migraine and I can't do anything. And so I can see how that has played in some ways, and then other ways I'm like, sometimes I feel like, okay, these migraines are really just a slap in the face of you're not eating the way you ought to be eating, or you're not, doing the healthy lifestyle that you think that you say that you want, and you're not doing that. And here's this migraine as a reminder of it. And so that I feel like is part of it too. So I guess that it still plays in the same way that he's discussing it. But I'm not doing the best that I want to be doing, and therefore, my subconscious is giving me these indicators that I'm not. So, I already know, but why do I need the pain too? That's the question. So, um, I don't know. It's interesting. So I think that going forward, I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to these aches and pains in my body and when they come up, in relation to things that I have going on in my life. So that's definitely something to consider. Now, I did have kind of an insight this week in relation to my work and whatnot, and this idea of the upper limiting concept in general. And that, when he was talking about in the previous chapters about worry and and that sort of thing, this week, well, up until just recently this week, I'm always worrying about stuff, worrying about all these different things that I feel like are either I can't afford to do anything about them right now, and so therefore I'm just worried about them. And for instance, there's all these like maintenance things on my house, and then there's this the fact that we all live in the same house, and I want to resolve that so that, I mean, we're still together, but not necessarily in each other's space 24/7. And then there's things with the property that just need to get done that I just am, financially, it's just not something I can do. So I stress out about all these things, and and yet on the other hand, then I have all these worries and frustrations and fears and whatnot as far as the business is concerned. And so I kind of have been like, okay, pushing these things off that I don't want to face because I don't entirely know what to do about them, or I don't want to face them because that means I have to do something about them, and so my insight, I guess, this week was, okay, you keep stressing yourself out about all this stuff you can't do anything about because of financial, or you're telling yourself it's financial reasons. And the solution, hello, wake up. The solution is to focus on making the business successful and face this crap that you don't want to face. And so I was like, oh, okay, something that should be completely obvious, right? Is I need to focus on making the business successful in all these ways that I haven't been wanting to face. And so then, as soon as I made that kind of connection in my mind, that okay, I can stop stressing about all this crap if I just focus on this instead. And then when I did that, I started having ideas pop into my head about how to face these things that I was frustrated and worried about. So so then that brings me back around to this concept of our subconscious working on solutions. And so instead of it giving me pain or a headache or whatever, it gave me some ideas of how can I accomplish these things that I don't want to face because I really don't know what to do. And it was like, why don't you just hire some freelancers? And I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to hire a full-time person to do this thing. I can like piecemeal these individual things that I don't know how to handle in by finding these freelance professionals. And so it's amazing how our minds, our bodies, our everything work when we are focused on solutions versus focusing on the problem. So, and this book in and of itself is talking about finding solutions, and or I mean it's talking about reaching your upper limits, obviously, but it's also about the solutions. What is the solution to get to your upper limit? And that is to overcome the fact that you're holding yourself back. So I've been holding myself back by focusing on the problem instead of trying to focus on a solution. So funny how that works, right?
Isn't it amazing how creative the universe is to I'm just amazed at life every day, like how everything works and how it's all just synchronizes. It's crazy amazing to me. And our human minds are so small and limited sometimes, and we're just like that dog that just keeps sitting on the nail, and won't move for some reason. And you're right. It absolutely, and it's funny because I come to that conclusion, seems like every day or, several times a week, is that, oh yeah, I'm focused on the problem again instead of the solution. Like I have to reel myself back in and remind myself, you don't have to figure this out. You just have to keep on track, keep taking the steps that you know to take every day to get to where you're going. Also, every day to give my subconscious or superconscious is, I guess, is how I would rather refer to it. Clear instructions on where I'm headed so that it knows where I'm trying to get to. And then I just keep taking my steps and I'll keep getting closer. And more opportunities and magic like shows up in my life that kind of makes the way. And then I'm like, oh wow, I didn't really have to figure all that out. Like it just fell right into my lap somehow. Or, it's just so amazing how different things um, fall into like your wheelhouse of things that because everybody's sort of got, well, hopefully everybody's sort of kind of got a plan going. It doesn't have to be like written out to every detail, but you have to kind of know where you're going, which I didn't know where I was going for a long time. So it really helped me to write that out, things that I imagine for myself in the future. Like they say, imagining it, when I read them in the mornings, usually is what I start my day that way. I read them and then I just sit for a moment, just a moment, and I just take that in and just feel it and experience it like it's happening now, and because they say that our mind doesn't know the difference of what's happening and what's not happening. Like if we're imagining something, our body's responding to it like that. So I figure if I just keep doing those things that I know to do and leave the rest up to God or whoever's running this show, it all seems to work out somehow. And every time I get focused on the problem and I can't figure out the problem and I'm getting aggravated or, you know, all that time, I'm not I'm not working towards what I'm going for. And I don't mean I necessarily have to be working all the time, but if I'm focused on the problem, I'm not being in an open, accepting place where I can get those little special messages, because I'm not, if I'm complaining or stressed or whining or whatever because of whatever, I'm not receiving, I'm just blah, blah, blah. And so you got to get to that. Even if you're not actively doing something as far as physically doing something to progress, if you're at least in that open state of mind and you're not in that negative space, then they can sneak messages into you or throw that Facebook video in front of you or whatever it is that you need to hear that day that's going to help you through.
Hey, yeah, I'll hop out again. I was listening to what you were saying there, Catherine, and that is, just being able to switch your mind into a receptive type of a mindset. And like you said, if you're focusing on the problems, that makes sense to me. That, and I've felt it. If I'm focusing on the problem, and I'm not as open and able to focus on a lot of the solutions. But if I'm focusing on the solution, then I'm also, in a way, trying to avoid the problem. But if you're completely just focused on not even just a solution, but the 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 things that are beyond your upper limit, if I could put it that way, and just being in that zone of genius, as they call it, just focusing on everything that exists in that zone of genius. You're not thinking about anything else, then it sort of can like seem like, I would guess, kind of pull your thoughts there and pull your kind of your whole, all your energies there, and giving no paying no mind and no attention to anything else. I mean, that it just seems like, oh, well, that should be, that's it. That's, that's the thing. Let's just do that. Then it's almost like you kind of have to let go of everything, even all the things that you really, like about being stuck where you are, the things that you're used to. And, we're kind of like the things that maybe they're not doing us really much any good, but they're keeping what we've grown to be comfortable with. It's just like what you're saying. It's just such a mind expanding thing. So that's all I wanted to say.
This has been a really insightful little section, I think. And well, I mean, this whole book so far has been pretty insightful and interesting, and just kind of like the aspect of facing this idea that, I mean, I always have felt like, okay, well, I'm not doing what I ought to be doing. Obviously, it's me that's holding me back, but looking at it from this different perspective is just a really interesting concept that, I have holding myself back in terms of by not wanting to face these things I don't know how to do or how to deal with, and how we tend to just kind of put them off to the side if we don't want to deal with them and we don't know how to deal with them, and or if we are worried about them in some way. It's easier to just ignore the problem versus working on finding a solution to the problem. So it's interesting, very interesting. So I'm really liking this book. Well, we're pretty close to the top of the hour, so if we have any final thoughts, we can share those before we wrap up. Any thoughts?
It's just that, well, just the thought of like what I was mentioning earlier about being in that zone of genius and seeking that zone of genius, because that seems to be the kind of the answer to it, whatever the limiting limiting thoughts or limiting beliefs or upper limit issue might be, is just to do whatever it is, like you're saying, like with the tackle the whatever your real true happiness on the other side of that pile of work that you were putting off, that we know is actually going to get us the success that we want, and that if we were to look at everything that we do as, well, let me avoid any sort of limitation, and just focus on the aspect of my zone of genius within that area of my existence, then it conjured up the visual of a feather floating on the wind, that kind of like in Forrest Gump, the movie Forrest Gump, or just almost we would kind of be like that, just kind of going wherever our we felt like we needed, I don't know, like just like wherever our dreams and aspirations took us, we would just go, and we'd almost have no time to sit and rest. We just, how a feather might come down and land on the park bench next to you for a split second and then take off into the wind again. And yet if one comes and it lands in a drop of water, now it's stuck there until it can dry out and catch the next breeze. But just that it's almost even just that thought of being swept up in your own zone of genius is almost like, you'd want to think that it's freeing and would make me, feel wonderful, but in a way it sort of feels scary, like I'll never get a chance to stop moving because I'll always be chasing some dream or aspiration. Well, that's kind of what that character in the movie did, is just never saw any upper limits. Just whatever his whim was, he just went ahead and did it, and didn't think about the possibility of it not, not being achieved. Just was kind of focused on getting that one thing done, and he accomplished. In that movie, the character accomplished so many amazing things. But it's just like, I think, like what you're saying, Catherine, just like the different, the mindset part of it, where we don't choose to get ourselves stuck, but we sort of, subconsciously we sort of do, and then our subconscious sort of also, not necessarily punishes us, but can also, I'm going to say, prevention or protection. Wow, just a number of great things to think about in regards to that. I also think that we can, whatever happens to us, if we say we got something we've got to type out on the computer and we end up cutting ourselves doing the dishes or something like that on our fingers, and now we have to, of course, we can always end up putting reasoning to something as well. But there's that slight possibility that it's an upper limit issue, and that we just kind of psychologically did that to ourselves. So really is amazing. I think, like you're saying, just the way that the universe works out, and everything is so tied to it's each other, but also so dynamic and has so much potential in and of itself. Every little thought, and what we're all so very much capable of doing, being able, such great things that we're able to accomplish, and maybe we're holding ourselves back. It's hard to think that we're not, because there is, it's hard to think that we're not, at least in some way, shape, or form, holding ourselves back about something that we would like to do or accomplish. So, but these discussions help us get to the heart of it, don't they? And even though it seems like, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of hard to think about, kind of stirs up some emotions, like don't really want to admit that I'm either doing something to avoid something, and now it's causing an issue that then I'm ignoring, that's causing another issue. Oh gosh. Wow. I'll have a lot to think about until next weekend. Thank you so much. It's been a great morning. Appreciate you all. Love you.
It can really snowball, can't it?
Yeah.
I am so glad you recognized, Samantha, that you could hire someone else to do those things you don't want to do. But that's assuming you have a plan, like me, just kind of out here in limbo. And my physical limitations have very much restricted me to, or limited myself to, writing. But do I sit down and write? Not very often. I've just been having little moments where things come into my mind, and thinking about, nothing has been created that wasn't a thought first. And so all the things that humanity is thinking of are coming into being is just blowing my mind that that's what's creating the discord, the destruction, and all of that things we think about in our minds actually come into being. So I don't know. I agree. Jason gets you thinking, and instead of doing, I don't know. It's been great, you guys. Have a Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, whatever you call it. Love you all. Thanks, Catherine, for reading.
My pleasure. Yeah, this is again, another reminder that we need to be very conscious of our thoughts and how long we let certain thoughts dwell. I mean, sometimes you can't help it when a thought pops into your head, but you have total control over how long that thought stays in your head, because even if it's a thought that keeps coming around and around and around, it's kind of like pain. You can distract yourself from it and you can get, some relief here and some relief here by just focusing on other things. And, but this is a great reminder of how careful we need to be about our thoughts. And I was listening to something the other day, and a lady said something that I found, I don't know, a little bit of a relief maybe, so I'll share it with you. And that is that, I think most of us here on this panel believe that we pre-plan our lives as souls before we come into this incarnation. And she was saying that although as humans we get here and we're facing the day to day, and we look outwards to see an easier way to face things, and when we look outwards we tend to see people that have money, and we know that when you don't have a lot of money, you're like stressed over this or stressed over that. Where are you going to get your next meal? How are you paying the rent or the mortgage or whatever? What's going to happen if the car breaks down? Like, we're thinking about all that stuff. And we think that more money is the answer to everything. And so many people spend a great portion of their lives focused on making more money. And sometimes, they do that to the detriment of experiencing joy in their life or experiencing a lot of things in their life, and perhaps even missing what their true nature and calling was. She said, because actually, as far as a soul looking at assignments coming, when we're making our decision to come here, we already have an understanding that money is not the most important thing. So we don't necessarily, when we're pre-planning, we don't necessarily look at wealth as something that we want to strive for, because she said wealth is actually like something that souls rarely choose. That's why there's so few people that have it. Very few souls choose that, because it is such a like, it's such a challenge. It's such a struggle to not be taken over by, I hate to say the dark side, but what I'm trying to say here, like, it's to have wealth, you have the opportunity to have anything you want. And sometimes like the animalistic part of people comes out and they make choices that causes karma that then could wind up with them having to come back for multiple other lives to try to like clear that stuff up. So she said that, you know, don't beat yourself up if you like are struggling for wealth and not getting it, because you probably don't want it. And, you know, in reality, you know, it's not even part of your life mission. And somehow hearing that, I don't know why, but somehow hearing that sort of took a little weight off my shoulders, because, you know, I have tried multiple times to get to what I think is a better state wealth wise, and, you know, and not to say that I'm not still going to strive forward, and not to say that I've ever really been money focused, more mission focused, but somehow it took a little weight off my shoulders that, you know, that may just not be part of my mission. And I will continue to go along and receive all the magic that the universe sends me every day, whether that looks like a dollar bill or not. So I love you guys, and happy holidays, Hanukkah, Christmas, whatever you celebrate. We love you, and thank you for being here with us. And we'll see. I don't think we're going to be here next week, so we're going to let everybody spend that time with their families or doing whatever they're trying to do, and just send out love to everybody. And remember, you know, a lot of people feel real lonely this time of year, because maybe, and especially with the last couple of years, people have lost people that are close to them. And you know, I don't want to challenge your beliefs or anything, but I'm just here to tell you, like, they're not gone. You're not alone. They're not gone. They're still here. They're just in a different form. And just, you know, talk to them and be with them. Just like if they were sitting at the dinner table, go ahead and put a plate there for them. They'll appreciate it. I love you guys. Have a good week.
Yeah, it's a great time of year for family and friends, and I hope everybody has an opportunity to spend their time with their loved ones this year. And we didn't really even discuss New Year's Eve, if we wanted to get together New Year's Eve, because that's the following Saturday. So I know we're going to have family things going on that day as well. So maybe we just want to skip the next 2 weeks and come back on the 7th. 7th? What do you think? Okay.
That'll be okay. It'll be fine with me. You've
Okay.
got quite a bit to think about.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, guys. Well, let's meet back on the 7th. And you guys have a wonderful holiday season. And those of you who are watching, if you've enjoyed this, give us a like, and then subscribe to our channel so you'll get a notification when we go live on YouTube, as well as when we update any videos that we've posted on there. So with that, guys, have a great, awesome, amazing week. And we'll see you next